Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cyrus Webb Presents. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. So glad you guys could be with us. For those tuning in on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and on X, we're glad that you all can join us. Also, we're connecting now with our friends over on Instagram. We're about to connect with our friends on Amazon Live for today's show. You guys are going to really enjoy this one. And I have to say, I learned so much thanks to our next guest. We're going to be speaking with Joan Fernandez today about her brand new book, Saving Vincent.
I'm delighted to be here, Cyrus. Thank you.
Look, I'm excited to have you on with us. And we're now also live, Joan, with our friends on Amazon Live. If our friends are new to us on the Amazon platform, welcome. Make sure you guys do hit that follow button. You see it here in the corner or down below. You also will see Joan's book, Saving Vincent, as well. And as you guys can see on the book, it says a novel of Joe Van Gogh. And of course, yes, we're talking about that Van Gogh. Of course, we're going to talk to Joe not only about the writing of the book, but also what it's been like for her to see the way that people are responding to it as well. Joan, I'm so glad to have this time with you. What has it been like for you to see the early response to Saving Vincent?
Well, I've just been so delighted, Cyrus, because I think the Van Gogh name is so gigantic that to find out that there's a whole other story behind why he became famous is really fascinating.
And Joan, I'm so glad you said that because I have to say, and I was saying to you before we went live here, I'd never heard of Joe Van Gogh before, and I'm sure there are others out there who have not either. But it's so interesting, and we'll dive more into the book here in a second. But it did make me even more interested in her to see what else I can find about her. Is that something you've been hearing from other readers also?
I think it's just a part of who we are today, right? We reach for Google to find out more information when we're curious.
This is true. So Joan, I think an obvious question would be, how did you find out about Joe Van Gogh?
Well, Cyrus, I was visiting the Van Gogh Museum. This was a while back. This was in 2016. And you know how you can just get caught up in Van Gogh's story. So I'm at the museum. I go through an audio tour. So he's in my head. And at the end of that tour, I'm just sort of full of this sense of, oh my gosh, this kind of unsung hero, this underdog who is so passionate. And so while I'm feeling this, I look over and there's a little family chart of Van Gogh's different members of his family. I see a photo of his father. Think of this little black and white, like little postage stamp pictures. There's his father. He didn't understand him. There's his mother. There's Theo, who was such an amazing emotional and financial lifeline. And I notice that Theo died right after Vincent, like 6 months after Vincent. And next to Theo's photo is a photo of a black and white photo of a young woman. And they had a little notation about how she had been the one that inherited and then promoted his works. And I remember Cyrus staring at her photo and thinking, if not for her, like we wouldn't have any of this. It was just kind of this moment at that time.
Yeah. And that's why when the book was first pitched to me, Joan, I have to admit, I didn't know, again, any of the story, right, about Joe Van Gogh. Or, of course, we know the name Vincent Van Gogh. But I think what you have done in this book, Saving Vincent, is personalize this. And when I thought as a creative myself, as an artist, I thought about the idea of what drives me. And I love the fact that in the book, when it comes to Joe, you talk about that same thing of purpose. You actually use that word. What was it like for you to kind of dive into what made her so passionate about not only, of course, taking care of herself and her family, we can talk more about that, but also making sure that people didn't forget about the impact that Vincent Van Gogh had made?
Yeah, I think that is something that captivated me actually for a long time as a story question, because I thought, why would she have such conviction around a man that she only met like 3 times in her life? And why then did she devote herself to getting his name out there? And Cyrus, some of the Googling that I did early on were saying things like, well, Joe was obeying her husband's vision. And that really ticked me off because I thought you don't devote your life to someone without having a sense of agency, right? And I do think it falls in the category of her listening to her own heart, her own sense of conviction about something that needed to be righted. Because at that time, Van Gogh was really being tossed aside. He was not at all considered someone to pay attention to.
Right. And I think too, that's what makes this story so personal in other ways as well, Joan, because you're able to tell the story of Jo Van Gogh, what she went through at that time. And then that again is an important thing for our audience to keep in mind, the time period that we're looking at here, where it was not something that was, I mean, very accepted that a woman like Jo would be able to do the work that she was doing, but also that she would be doing it alone the way that she was. And I think the other side of that being, as I mentioned too, about purpose, how you talked about that she really felt like it was something she needed to do, that she had been so impacted by Vincent van Gogh's work that she knew other people would as well. Talk to us about that aspect when it comes to time, because I think there's some interesting parallels there even today, Joan. Did you find that too as you were writing the book, that in some respects that Jo Van Gogh could have been living in our time and dealing with those same challenges?
Yes, because so for example, I thought about how she would have grown up and thought about herself. So at that time, it was assumed that women had a smaller brain. So there's no way they could handle something like business, that they needed a conservatorship. Like she should have automatically gone under the care of her father because she had a 1-year-old baby when her husband died. And these sort of, we grow up with these ubiquitous messages that come to us from society about all sorts of assumptions about what we cannot do. And so I was really impressed that she turned that on its head and decided, you know what? I'm going to take what I call door number 3. I'm not going to go home to my father. I'm not going to leave all this artwork with other people. I'm going to take this up on my own and do what I think is right. And I think Cyrus, there's a couple reasons why she was able to do that, but probably primarily it's because she had an unusual marriage with Theo, who treated her like an equal partner. They would talk about Vincent's artwork when it came in, these tubes. He'd roll up his canvases and mail these tubes of paintings. They'd be together when those tubes were opened up, and they'd talk about the artwork. Theo talked about the challenges of his work because at that time, art dealing was like a dogfight. It was just so incredibly difficult. And I think that had he not envisioned and treated Jo like someone that he trusted her opinions and relied on them, that she would not have had the resilience and really enough gumption to feel like she could do this herself.
Such a great point. And we're going to get more into that. Hello to you, Ro Brooks. I see you over there on IG. I see you guys over on YouTube and X as well. If you guys have any questions or comments for Joan, feel free to be able to put those in the comment section there. I am monitoring the chat also there on Amazon. If you guys have any questions, let me know too. Joan, were there big surprises for you? I know you talked about the experience of seeing that black and white photo. I can't even imagine what that was like for you initially. Were there things that as you were researching and writing this book that you had like, wow, I can't believe she was able to do ...
Well, I think that it really dawned on me as I was doing my research that she really had an intuitive sense of marketing. So, for example, today it's not uncommon for us to kind of know the story of the artists or the authors that are behind the works that they're doing. But at that time, really, art was just considered, there's the canvas on the wall. And so something that she did, which I thought was really remarkable, is she took Vincent's letters after she read them herself and found excerpts, matched them with drawings, and had those then published in articles in, there's an art newspaper at the time called Le Mercure that was in Paris. And so by publishing these letters and the drawings, she created curiosity around who was this man that prior to that was simply a guy who had committed suicide and had been kind of a loser, right? Like just only people in this very sort of narrow band of artists knew about Van Gogh. She's the one that created curiosity in the public around his works. And I thought that was really brilliant and ahead of her time.
Right. Such a great point. Hello to you, Delia. Thank you so much for the compliment. I'm glad you could join us over there on Facebook. TNL Radio TV. Hello to you over there also on IG as well. And Joan, as you were talking, I thought about that too, because it kind of goes to our appreciation for the arts today and how our idea of artists even has evolved over the years. I remember when I was growing up, when I told people I wanted to be an artist and a writer, everyone thought at that point that you had to be dead to be, to be known. And
Mhm,
people look at
mhm.
people as did like Van Gogh, right? Say,
Right.
you don't know who you are until you're dead, and then at that point, so what else are you going to do? What was that like for you to think about? How even in that, how the times have shifted in some ways, but now artists, the importance of artists is appreciated, as it was even for Joe.
Well, I think that's really an interesting point. I think that, I I think now art is accessible to people of all classes. At
Yeah,
that time, I think it was considered something that was a little bit more elite, right? You had to be a woman had to be holding on to her husband's elbow as she walked around a gallery type of a thing. And now, in fact, that's something that Jo did is she opened up those doors for what she considered laborers or the working class by doing things like offering free admission or a reduced admission to the exhibits. And I think that was something that that today we take for granted that was not the case at that time.
such a great thing. I think that's it. Talk to us about for yourself as a writer yourself. I mean, you're someone who has a love of words too. Did you feel a connection with Vincent Van Gogh in that too about having the works that you're able to do reach an audience and to resonate with an audience as it did with Joe Van Gogh?
Gosh, I think that the idea of writing a novel and getting it published is so like immense that it's hard for me to think beyond that to other people actually reading it. But I do definitely have this sense of I'd love to have her story be more broadly known. And
Mm,
so in that regard, I would hope that her story goes from person to person to person as, "Hey, did you know?" and then fill in the blank that there is a
yeah,
woman who is the reason that we know Van Gogh today.
yeah. There is an interesting trend I've been noticing even this year in 2025, Joan, of several authors I've interviewed who have written historical fiction, and that a lot of them have as the main centerpiece a woman who a lot of us didn't know, but who
Yeah.
had tremendous impact. I had an opportunity to interview Victoria Christopher Murray earlier this year, and she was her new book Harlem Rhapsody, talking about the woman kind of behind the Harlem Renaissance that I knew nothing about before reading this book. Is that also part of what you hope too? That I mean, newer generations who may not even be that interested in art may be interested in just the example of a person like Joe Van Gogh, who shows that with hard work, persistence, dedication, that you can make a difference where you are.
Yes, I love that point, Cyrus. And I have to say, as an aside, I love Victoria Christopher Murray. She's fantastic. So, um, um, I think that your broader point is so critical today because if we carry on this sort of myth that genius and talent only exist in the narrow band of people of
Mm,
sort of the status quo, then we completely do ourselves a disservice of not really understanding our past, right? This sort of
right.
more comprehensive and inclusive sense of where we come from and where talent lies because Joe and Vincent were both outside the status quo. They
Mm,
were, and so here was brilliance that was able to foster and grow because they were not encumbered by authority and power and the right thing and the way to get things done. And I think that our society, our progress gets stunted if we assume that we all don't have the capacity to have agency and use our creativity.
yeah. What has given you the drive, Joan, personally, to do what you love as a storyteller and to tell stories like this? What is it that has prompted you? Because you mentioned earlier, it's not like publishing is very easy. It is a process for sure. But what has made writing and getting stories out like this so important for you?
You know, Cyrus, it's the craziest thing because a long time ago, I promised myself that I would write a book. I mean, I was one of those kids that loved books. I was I took AP English in high school. I was an English major, all these type of things. And I've always loved language. And then, life took over and I
Mm,
had all sorts of other jobs. And it wasn't until maybe, oh, eight or 9 years ago that I was suddenly reminded of this promise that I'd made myself, and it really caught me off guard, and I realized, you know what? If I don't do something about this, I'll never write a book. And so Joe's story came along after that, but it all comes under this sense of I remember reading about the 5 regrets of the dying, and the first regret is I regret I didn't have the courage to live a life true to myself, but did what others expected of me.
Yeah.
And Cyrus, I just had this sense that I would regret this if I didn't keep this promise to myself.
Wow. That's powerful. That's powerful. So, Joan, I want to ask you, for those who are just finding out about Saving Vincent, as I mentioned, it's available here on Amazon, either in print or the Kindle edition. I'm going to highlight it for you guys, the Kindle edition right now. You guys can be able to get as well. If they just are finding out about Saving Vincent, what do you hope readers take away from it? But also, I think the larger point that we've been talking about the impact of individuals like Jo Van Gogh, because I say it that way, Joan, because just like you've been able to help shine a spotlight on her, I think about all the other women out there who we don't know about the impact they've been able to make on what we appreciate. But in your case, what do you hope Saving Vincent does for the reader?
I hope that people have a sense that they can have a sense of determination and persistence too in following, the intuition and the gut sort of feelings that we have about something we want to pursue or something that we want to say, or maybe just simply having our voice heard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that my hope is that through writing the book, I was able to do that for myself personally, but I'm also giving a voice to Jo so that her story is more broadly known. So whatever that voice is that people have, I would hope that maybe they'd feel a sense of encouragement to go ahead and use it.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, and it's a great reminder for all of us as well. Again, everyone, Joan Fernandez has been our guest. Saving Vincent is the book, as you guys can see there. It really is a great one to be able to add to your reading list for those who have not been able to get it for themselves. Joan, really appreciate you stopping by today. Congratulations to you again. How can our audience stay connected with you?
Well, I do have a website, joanfernandezauthor.com. And so that's got all my contact information on there. I'm on social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'd be delighted to hear from folks and to find out why they love Van Gogh and also what they think of this story about Jo Van Gogh bringing Van Gogh to our world today.
Love that. Well, really excited we can have a chance to be able to speak with you today. Looking forward to our next conversation together, Joan.
All right. Thank you, Cyrus. I appreciate you. Thank you.
More than welcome. And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Cyrus Webb Presents. Until next time, I'm Cyrus Webb saying thank you so much for being with us. We'll talk to you soon. You all take care.